Welcome, everybody, to another season of Hot Takes on the Lake. If you are a podcast listener, we are now also on YouTube in video format as well. Check out Hot Takes on the Lake on YouTube. And if you're a new viewer watching here on YouTube, thank you for joining us. All of our episodes are also in audio versions wherever you listen to your podcast, Hot Takes on the Lake. We're going to jump into a lot to talk about here, so I'm just going to get right into it. But first, I'm Josh, and I'm joined by your host as always, Nick. Nick, how's it going? How's your summer been? How are you feeling about this Browns season?
Well, Josh, it's first off, it's good to see your face for once. Even though we've been friends for years, it is still nice to see your face when we get on here and talk about the Browns. But the off season's been good. The summer's been good. Um, it was exciting with all the Deshaun Watson news with the trade. We thought we'd have high hopes for the season, and now the season's not looking so promising, at least from the quarterback position. But still, we're going to be here for another season talking Browns football, and I'm still excited for it because football's back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like almost it's like a crazy feeling every year how much I look forward to the season starting, not just the Browns but the whole NFL. It's just truly wild. I can't think of anything else throughout the year that I look forward to as much, which is pretty wild. And it's been a super long spring and summer, probably because of so much stuff that happened Browns related way back in like March and April. So we've just had to wait, since then with all this exciting stuff, all this change going on with the team. It's basically, especially on the offense, a brand new team going into this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There were guys that came in. There's a lot of new guys there. There's a lot of guys that they've been here for a while are now gone. Like I said, especially with the quarterback position, starting with Baker Mayfield, and going down the line, there's a lot of areas that were pretty, I'll be honest, pretty weak at the position, which is alarming, and we'll get into more detail about that. But yeah, there's a lot of still good things, a lot of positives, a lot of things I'm still looking forward to this year. But I think there's definitely going to be some, it's going to be a roller coaster type of season still.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to jump into what we're going to be talking about in this season opening episode is just quickly going over all of those major offseason stories with the Browns, giving our takes on it. And then we're also going to be jumping into the draft class, our thoughts on that. And then we're going to be jumping into our week by week record predictions like we do every year for the Cleveland Browns and where we think they'll end up this season, as well as giving a Super Bowl prediction before going into this year. So we're not going to be doing too much NFL stuff outside of the Browns today, but we will give just a Super Bowl overall prediction at the end. So make sure to join us for all of that. And if it's your first time here, whether you're listening or watching, make sure to subscribe so you can join us for every episode of Hot Takes on the Lake this season. So, Nick, kind of the first big offseason story that happened was actually way back in early March. And that is when we franchise tagged David Njoku. A lot of going back and forth with him over the last couple of years. I think at one point he even requested a trade from the Browns. We obviously did not grant that. And then we ended up franchise tagging him. And then to jump a little bit ahead here, but it is part of the same story, eventually he signed a contract extension, adding 3 more years on top of that franchise tag. We're going to be talking about a lot of the players that we brought back or signed and or traded for this year. And of all of them, this one to me is probably the most baffling of why we did it and how we're going to be able to afford it, because we're paying him over $50 million over the next 4 years. And I like David Njoku. He's been a good tight end, but he's not, a huge playmaker for us. This one did have me scratching my head a little bit. What did you think about the initial franchise tag and then the eventual contract extension for David Njoku?
Yeah, I wasn't so much shocked with the franchise tag. It seemed like they liked David Njoku a lot. But then, like you said, to go with the 3-year extension and for that much money, for a guy who, I think he was way back with the Jabril Peppers draft. So we've had him for a while now, and at least by Brown standards, we've had him for a while. And he's a guy that is a freak athlete. Is just can jump out of the gym, but has been really inconsistent. Shown some flashes here and there, and especially with the way Kevin Stefanski likes to run this offense with a lot of tight end sets, going heavy tight end. He's a good receiver for sure. His hands have gotten a lot better, but especially blocking too. It's still an area that he needs to work on. So I I'm fine with bringing him back, but like you said, just for that much money, especially as we'll talk about Deshaun Watson's contract and Denzel Ward's new contract, with all this money that we're giving to guys who are proven commodities and proven superstars in this league, it was a little bit of a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I like him as a player. I think he can be really good.
Mhm.
I've heard some rumblings that I guess he's really gotten more into the blocking side of being a tight end in this offseason, which will be good to see. But yeah, that one of all the stuff, all the players we signed and traded for, how much money we gave him, I'm hoping is not something that's going to, bite us later on. But I'm staying optimistic. Staying with not tight ends, but, the receiving core, we did not keep Jarvis Landry. We did not re-sign him, and he is no longer with the Cleveland Browns. Actually, I'm not 100% sure if he's with anybody at this point. Maybe you know more than me, but he is not a Cleveland Brown. He's been a huge part, of the culture since I think 2018. So I am sad to see him go personally, just from a personal level. I liked him as a player, but at the end of the day, he was not a huge playmaker for us. He was really more so, like I said, that cultural piece. But what were your thoughts on him no longer being with the Browns?
Yeah, it was mixed. Like you said, just from when he got here until the time he left, he was a big guy in the locker room, just trying to change the culture and not have it be the quote same old Browns as they have been for the past 20 or so years. Um, yeah, I mean he's not a number one receiver. He's not Devontae Adams or anything like that, but I always viewed him as just a model of consistency. When you needed a completion, when you needed a first down, you could go to Landry. He's not the biggest guy, the fastest guy, but he just runs good routes and just always knows how to get open. And I think he also suffered from bad quarterback play, not getting him the ball. I think he could have made more plays than he did. So I think he was a victim of that. Um, Off the top of my head, I want to say he signed with the Saints. I'll have to check on that. I know there were like a lot of rumors because he went to LSU. He was going to the Saints, but I'm pretty sure he signed there. Yeah, like I said, sad to see him go, but on the other hand, he is older now. He is older, further along in his career, so I'm glad we didn't overpay just to keep an aging receiver who, like we said, is not a legit number one guy.
Yeah, and I just looked it up. It does look like he is with the Saints. So, I mean, I definitely wish him the best of luck there. They're, not in our
Hmm.
conference, so I'm not too worried about him affecting our season. I'm glad he's, still on a team, and hopefully he does well there. We also released J.C. Treader, who was a big part of our offensive line in previous years, and then he actually ended up retiring this offseason. He still remains the NFLPA president, but he is retired from the NFL after leaving the Browns. What was your opinion on that?
That one was a bit shocking too, just considering that unfortunately, his replacement, Nick Harris, a second year guy, his season is already over before it started. So now you really have a big question mark at center. Again, a guy who is not, one of the premier centers in the league, but he was always solid when he was healthy. And just a good solid signal caller as far as the offensive line goes. I think he had a good chemistry with the guys on his side like Wills, Batonio, and Teller. Um, but yeah, I mean, and then like you said, the shocking part was to see him retire. There were some rumblings that nobody wanted to sign him because he was or still is the PA president for the Players Association. So, it's been a good career for him, but especially like I said, with how slim we are at center now, I really wish we could have kept him again. But it is what it is. We're gonna have to move forward without him. But yeah, it was a little shocking to see him go like that.
Yeah, and obviously we thought we'd be moving on to Nick Harris, who had his season unfortunately ended at, what was it, 2 plays into the first preseason game, I think it
Yeah.
was. And, that happens. You can't prepare for it or anything, but that's really unfortunate that we lose Treader and then our replacement is now already gone. So not great to be vulnerable there. Um, but moving on, our first kind of big move as far as bringing in another player, a new player to the Browns before we made that trade for Deshaun Watson. We actually traded for Amari Cooper, and we didn't have to give up that much. We gave up a 6th round pick for this year, and I believe a fifth round or a fifth and sixth round pick, I believe, and got a sixth round pick back. So really did not give up that much for what at one time was considered one of the elite receivers in the league. I think his reputation has dropped a little bit from that, but he's still a really good receiver, especially compared to what we've had the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, he's dropped off a little bit. Right now, he's probably a very low end number one guy, very high end number two receiver out there. But another guy who, most importantly, just runs really good routes, knows how to get open, is a great route runner. And like you said, we didn't have to not even overpay, but didn't have to give up way too much to get him. So you needed a guy that one could just get open and one who is, has a lot of experience. And I think again with the, hopefully with a better quarterback, you can really take advantage of having a guy like that because with Landry, I mean, he's better than Landry for sure, but Odell Beckham, it just never seemed to work with him. For whatever reason, we've already talked about that, at nauseum, but still, just having a guy like that with that much talent and having a good quarterback, I think he can be really, really special in this offense.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him. This was a guy that honestly I had forgotten about because it was so early on in the offseason that we did it. And then when we
Hmm.
traded for Deshaun and that kind of blew up, all of the Browns coverage that in the following months I had kind of forgotten. So when I was reminded, I was like, oh, wow, that's going to be awesome. So I'm really excited to have him. I had to include this one because I thought this might have been your favorite move of the offseason. We traded Mac Wilson. And got in return Chase Winovich. I think we won that trade for sure. I've already seen some narratives go around since this trade of now all of a sudden Mac Wilson's this really sneaky great player. I don't think so. But what did you think about that trade?
I mean, yeah, if there's anybody who can, tap into the untapped potential of Mac Wilson that they've been talking about for the past couple of years, I think it's going to be Bill Belichick. But I still don't think that Mac Wilson is ever going to live up to the hype that he had when he was drafted. Again, I mean, he was a late round pick. I can't remember exactly. It's been a few years now. I can't remember why he fell exactly. But yeah, but people were saying there was a steal of the draft. It was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school and had a good college career, but again, for whatever reason, just never seemed to work here. Never really could live up to that potential. So, again, wish him the best of luck. We got Winovich back, who's a decent rotational pass rusher, and can really hopefully just make an impact on the defense because really. I mean, Taki was making more of an impact, especially with his versatility on special teams too, than Mac Wilson was. So, like you said, yeah, we definitely won that trade.
For sure. And then another player that I think, if I would guess, you were probably happy to see go was Austin Hooper. Gave him a really big contract to come here, and he did not provide much for us. I was happy to see him go. What about you?
Yeah, I didn't want to correct you, but this was my favorite move of the offseason
Oh, okay, okay.
was getting rid of Austin Hooper. I get nothing personal against the guy, but I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, how many times do you have to see him, catch a ball for 3 yards and immediately just collapse to the ground, just, zero yak yards. It was just unbelievable just how he would catch the ball, just immediately fall to the ground. And that's only when he got open, too. I mean, for all the money we were paying him, it was just unbelievable, just the lack of production we got out of him. Again, inconsistent quarterback play affects that, I'm sure, but still, he just, was never worthy of that contract. So I mean, it was a good thing to see him go.
Absolutely. And then before we get to the even bigger quarterback news, we did also sign who is going to be our starter, willing that he stays on the field, obviously, for the first 11 games of the season, and that is Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby would spend most of his career so far in Indianapolis, but he played last year for Miami. I haven't followed him that closely, but just from looking through his stats, he seems like he's just one of those, just a guy. He can start for you, but he's not going to win you the game. We'll jump more into kind of the specifics when we preview the Panthers game a little bit later this week, but overall, what was your initial reaction when we got Jacoby, and how do you feel about him in a general sense, him being that starter week one and moving forward this season for, our first chunk of games?
I mean, at first I was, happy about it because I thought, oh, he can be a decent, backup guy. He, like you said, he's not going to win you a game. He might not lose you a game, but he's going to be a really solid backup for Deshaun Watson. And here we are. He's going to be the starter for the majority of the season. But um, like you said, yeah, he's just a guy. I think he's solid. He's not going to do anything flashy. Like you said, I don't think we're going to lose the game because of him. But I mean, I don't think anything that he does or any of his skills are really going to win us any games either. I think there's going to be some games that, might be close during this season. And, it just if we had, Deshaun Watson out there or just a better quarterback in general, especially with Deshaun's versatility as far as running the ball too, um, I think there's going to be some plays that, we could have made to win a close game down the road, just because of his lack of, he's just not that guy. He's not that top tier quarterback. But again, I think he's going to be solid. I think you're going to have to go pretty heavy with Chubb and Hunt this year, lean on them a lot. Especially with the thin receiver room too. So I think it's going to be a run heavy year just because of his limitations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, in a lot of ways, I'm not even going to say, we'll talk about Baker a lot later, but I'm not going to sit here and say I think he's better than a healthy Baker Mayfield, but I think the situation is going to be pretty similar to last year when Baker was hurt, and it was kind of like you just want him to not lose the games for you and just have the rest of the team kind of support him and manage the game without making too many mistakes. So I'm honestly not going to have really much more of an opinion on him until we see him these first few weeks. So I am excited for it, but yeah, not obviously thinking he's going to be any type of answer long term. But it's nice to have him on the team. I think you could have many worse backup quarterbacks. So moving on though to the big news, and we did have a special offseason episode about this. But just to kind of touch on it one more time in case someone's new here, obviously biggest story of the offseason, not only for the Browns, you could argue just in the NFL in general. It just happened to be for Cleveland. Deshaun Watson gets traded to the Browns. We give up our first round pick this year and next year, a bunch of other picks as well. And we got him from a very sticky situation. I don't know how much we're going to jump into that because, what is there to say more at this point? But he will be suspended because of that situation for 11 games. His first game will be week 13, I believe, because of our bye week 13 at Houston, of all places. So I just want to let you first say your opinion on him as a player, what you think that means this season and long term for the Browns, and then also about the suspension and kind of how you feel that leaves the chances of this season. And we'll jump into that a little bit more as we do our week by week prediction and our final predictions, but just kind of your initial reaction to that whole suspension scenario.
Yeah, I mean, at least on the field, he's just a major upgrade at the most important position in football, and that's what you've been, that's what you've been asking for 22 years since the Browns came back. You've been trying to find that quality of a quarterback, and I have always liked Deshaun Watson on the field. I thought he was just hampered by. I mean, Houston had some good players, especially J.J. Watt in his prime. They had some really good players. He was just, his downfall was really just a bad offensive line. He was always, anytime I was watching the Texans, he was always running for his life. So I think that's really going to, be a nice change for him, just having a nice solid offensive line to protect him, at least on the field. And I really think he can be the quarterback that we've been looking for all these years. Off the field, I mean, I'm not going to be buying the guy's jersey or anything like that. I'm still going to support the team. We touched on it, like you said, in the offseason, that special offseason episode. A lot of people are done with the Browns because of it. I mean, I perfectly understand that. That's your right. I will just I can't just stop rooting for the Browns. Even though I don't like the guy, what he did or was alleged of, I guess, or him personally. But still, I'm gonna support the team. But I really think the Haslams just had to sit down and say, look, you know, it's been a pretty much, a failure trying to find a decent quarterback for all these years, even before we owned the team. If it's going to cost us $250 million to get this guy, a bona fide, when he's healthy, a top five quarterback, pretty much, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to say, hey, the PR risk is worth it. I think people will move past it. I think that's their words, not mine. And yeah, I think that was their mentality basically, like almost like the Rams. Like, hey, we're just gonna go out. We're gonna, basically, I saw this meme. It was like, fuck them draft picks. It was a picture of Andrew Berry, and it was just like, you know what? To hell with it. We're gonna just, bet the farm on this guy, go all in. It hasn't worked through the draft. It hasn't worked, for trading or free agency. So let's go out and trade for the one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and we're just gonna roll with it. So I think, at least from the Haslam's perspective, I think that was their mentality through this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you basically, I agree with you on almost everything you said there, so I don't have much to add. I will just say that from a team and player standpoint, I'll get to this season later on in the predictions, but I think for the next, 3, 4, 5 years, if we are not heavy contenders in the playoffs every year, it's going to be shocking to me. Unless Deshaun Watson
Mhm.
all of a sudden forgot how to play football, or unless every single great player on our team is no longer here, we have some weird purge, we should be contenders because of this move, and that's regardless of who he is as a person. I don't really have an opinion on him as a person as it pertains to the Browns. But yeah, as far as this season in particular, though, we'll get to that a little bit later because not looking great in that regard. All right, and then we had a couple other moves before the draft. This first one wasn't huge. We had already gotten Brissett and traded for Deshaun, but we also signed Josh Dobbs, former Steeler, I believe. Don't expect him to see the field this year, but how do you feel about Josh Dobbs?
I'm praying he doesn't see the field because again, we're just one injury to Brissett away from seeing Josh Dobbs have to start. I mean, to his credit, he's been killing it in the preseason, and Brissett has been struggling. I mean, that obviously you can't read anything into the preseason, and I never do, but still, it is comforting at least. Okay, he is playing decent against lower competition. If he was still playing bad against this lower competition, that might be a different story. But yeah, I mean, as a backup, I don't really expect much from him. There were talks of bringing Jimmy Garoppolo in, but I'm glad again we didn't have to mortgage more of our future away just for 11 games of Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think he'll be a fine backup quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly happened with the Steelers, but I do know at one point, he was a candidate to be the follow-up to Ben Roethlisberger. Obviously, that didn't end up happening for him, but from what I saw of him in the preseason, I was impressed by, obviously against backup players, but as a backup, I'm totally fine with him. And even moving after this year, if Jacoby, was no longer here and Josh Dobbs becomes that backup to Deshaun, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world either. It's not like a few years ago with Baker and his rookie deal where we have that money to get these Case Keenums or whoever to pay him a lot of money to be the backups, because all that money is going to be going to Deshaun. So I think Josh Dobbs would be a solid one. And then even bigger news, this one I was surprised by, but I like it. I want to get your thoughts. We signed Denzel Ward, massive 5-year extension. So he's going to be a Cleveland Brown for a very long time. I love Denzel Ward when he's on the field. Obviously, he's had a little bit of trouble there. I thought 100% this guy is too good. We can't afford him. He's going to be a salary cap casualty after his 5th-year option. But somehow they made it work, and now he's here for a super long time. So I'm excited. Don't know what that's going to mean for us money-wise in a few years, but how do you feel about it?
I'm the same as you. When he's on the field, Denzel Ward is one of the premier cornerbacks in this league. So it's good that we have him locked down for 5 more years. And yeah, I think we both kind of had the same thought that, just with all the money that is going to have to go to different places, he might be one of those guys that, yeah, it's gonna be a tough pill to swallow to see him go with all his talent. But it managed to pull it off, and there's gonna be a lot of money tied up in a couple of guys. But like I said, when he's healthy, that guy is one of the best in the league. So, barring any injury, I think it's gonna be money well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because of that, we're probably going to be losing some other corners that we had drafted around that same time too. We can't pay them all. But with that being said, that does take us to the draft, where we obviously didn't have really any early picks because of our trades. But that doesn't mean we didn't get anybody in the draft. We had a pretty deep draft, even though it was in mid to late rounds. So if you're new here, Nick is the college football guy. I am not. I watched Ohio State and Notre Dame this weekend. Very good
There you
game.
go.
I also watched Michigan versus I forget the school that they ended up playing, but they destroyed them for the most part. Uh, um,
I think it was like Colorado State or somebody like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. And I also saw a little bit of that game that was on Sunday that had that crazy ending. I didn't see the ending, even though that ended up being the craziest part with the blocked extra point. I think it was
Oh yeah.
LSU. Yeah. So I'm getting into it, but it's Nick is much more into it to me than me. So he's gonna have thoughts on these guys. I don't really know any of them, so you can tell me about them, Nick. But our first pick was a cornerback, which we're going to be needing to pick, and my mentality. I love picking corners, safeties, all secondary players in the draft. I think you have to get them every year. And we picked one in the third round, Martin Emerson from Mississippi State. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough thing. I think a lot of people thought was he was maybe a bit of a reach. Probably could have got him in round four, maybe even five. Um, but again, I mean, like you said, especially with Denzel and Greedy Williams in particular, always being banged up, you're always going to need good depth at the cornerback position, and it's a passing league, so you're always going to need depth there. And from what I've been hearing and what I've heard other teams say that, I know the Eagles were, raving about him after we played them. I think we played him in the preseason or we practiced against him or something, and they said, yeah, Emerson, that guy was a steal. You guys got a good player there. So he's been rated pretty high, I think, for PFF. Again, take that for what it's worth in the preseason. But I think he's a good guy for now. He doesn't have to be your number one starter. That's the main thing. He's going to be a fourth guy, and maybe even a fifth guy, depending on if AJ Green, who played well last year, he's going to get those reps. So he can really learn behind a couple of really good corners in Denzel and Newsome ahead of him. So yeah, I like the pick, and again, like you said, those positions that you mentioned, you always need depth there, and especially with the guys that we have. So I think the pick will work out pretty well.
And he was only one of three picks in the third round for the Browns. The second one was defensive end Alex Wright from UAB, and then we also took wide receiver David Bell from Purdue. What do you think about those players? If you know anything about them, I did see a lot of David Bell in the preseason, so they were getting him a lot of reps in the preseason. Don't know how much time he'll see on the field necessarily this year, but what do you think about those two players?
Well, I like David Bell. I'm really high on him. And especially with what only five receivers that we have on the roster right now, there's a chance that he's going to get a lot of early reps. But I think he's got a lot of potential. Again, another guy who's not going to just come in and be a superstar, but who can sit behind, like it's Amari Cooper, who's a great route runner, learn behind a good veteran like that, and hopefully, with how thin we are at receiver, I hope he doesn't come down to him having to get, a ton of reps this year just because he's not. I don't think he's very ready. But I'm very high on him. Alex Wright, I don't know much about. But again, like you said, I mean, that's another position where they're constantly in a rotation. So I think he can be good. I think he can be a good guy to get some reps in there, especially with Clowney. He has an injury history. Miles Garrett gets banged up from time to time. He can go in there and with like a Winovich and spell some of those guys too. So I think our top three picks here, Emerson, Wright, and Bell, I think they have a bright future, but again, not right now. I think they just have to sit back and learn for a while.
All right, and then in the fourth round, we took two players, defensive lineman Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma, and then probably my favorite pick of the draft, kicker Cade York. You very rarely see a kicker drafted so high in the draft, but I've heard just so many good things about him, and maybe LSU could have used him last week for that extra point. But yeah, he seems to be great. I heard during one preseason game they were saying that before the game he was kicking field goals from like 70 yards and making them, which sounds insane. But yeah, what are your thoughts on those two players?
Yeah, I'll start with Winfrey. I know least about him besides York. I think he's a good, it's a high energy guy. Again, we're thin at defensive tackle too at the interior line, so he might be a guy that can actually get some reps in a rotation basis. So I'm high on him. And Cade York, yeah, it's it's always like the thing that you don't draft kickers, especially as high as the fourth round, maybe 6 or 7 if you really like somebody. But Cade York was the bona fide best kicker in the draft, and like you said, he's proven it because people have been taking videos at practice where he's hitting 60 yarders, and it's not like he's just like banking them off like the upright or anything like that. He still has room, like he could go back another 10 yards. So and I think he's the only kicker on the team now,
Yeah.
so there's no competition for him. And he just has a hell of a leg, so I good on him, and I think the pick is going to work out, at least so far it looks that way.
All right, and then in the later rounds here, the back half of the draft, I'll just name them all off here, and you can give opinions on the ones that you have thoughts on. So in the fifth round, we had running back Jerome Ford from Cincinnati. I saw a lot of him in the preseason as well, although it looks like in the regular season here, he's mostly going to be used for the return game. In the sixth round, we took wide receiver Michael Woods the second from Oklahoma, and we also took from Oklahoma in the second round defensive lineman Isaiah Thomas, and then we ended the draft in the second round with Dawson Deaton, offensive lineman from Texas Tech. Any thoughts on any of those players?
Yeah, Ford had that nice run in the one preseason game. He showed flashes that he could be a really good running back. Obviously, with the guys ahead of him, it's going to be tough to get reps unless there's just a bunch of injuries to Chubb, Hunt, and even Dearness Johnson. So I mean, he's a guy that I'd like to hang on to just because he has shown flashes that he can be a good running back. So going to be interesting to see there. Michael Woods, I think he's the fifth receiver right now. I think he's the last guy. So he's another guy that they're high on. They say have a lot of potential. Again, just like I'm just worried about that damn receiver room. A couple of injuries, and some of these younger guys are going to have to get big time reps when they're not ready. So that concerns me. But yeah, defensive line, Isaiah Thomas. Again, just another guy that for depth there. Um, and then Dawson Deaton. I know you said on the college football guy. I really got nothing on him, or even Isaiah Thomas for that matter. But yeah, just some young guys that they can hopefully develop. And we have one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, so maybe he can do something with Deaton to really bring him along.
And I just want to know how many professional athletes are going to be named Isaiah Thomas. That's what I think the main story out of this is. If you're born with that name, you just have an advantage. Professional athlete.
You have to play sports. There's no other option. You can't do anything else.
And then, so that is our draft for the Cleveland Browns. And before we move on, just really quickly, if you had to just give like an overall grade or just how satisfied you were with this draft, considering we did not have any picks in those first two rounds, what did you think of it?
I would probably give it a solid. I'd probably give it a solid B. Nothing really. I don't think we reached for anybody too egregiously. It seemed like especially the positions that we needed, that we were in need of, that we actually went after, which is I feel like is very unlike the Browns. It seems like whenever we need one position, they just draft everything around that besides that position. But yeah, we got some high draft picks in some positions that we really needed. We needed some depth at. So overall, I think it was a solid draft for not having a pick in the first two rounds.
All right, and then moving back to just a few more moves here in the offseason. Two more re-signings, each for just one more year. First, we signed Jadeveon Clowney, bringing him back for one more year. Excuse me. And then we also brought back Dearness Johnson, bringing him back for one more year as well. Dearness Johnson, it was like a couple $1 million, nothing big. I was just more so surprised that no other team wanted to pick him up, to be honest, in free agency. And then Jadeveon Clowney, we gave him a pretty big deal. I think it was about $10 million, but $8 million of it was a signing bonus that cap-wise the Browns are splitting over the next 5 years. So it could be possible that Clowney is only with us this year, and then we're still paying cap on that for the next few years, but it's only about 1.6 million every year, not the biggest deal. But how do you feel about each of those players coming back to the Browns?
I'm the same way as you. I thought Dearness Johnson would at least get a few offers from somebody, if not even a starter role, even a nice backup, a type of role, just because I think when he's played over the past 2 years, just with the injuries that Chubb and Hunt have had, I think he's shown that he can be a solid running back. Especially that Denver game where he had to start. He was, pretty much the MVP of that game because we really couldn't do much else, offensively speaking. So I'm happy we brought him back. And, it might be the last year that he's here. Maybe he'll eventually get another contract with somebody. But again, with those guys getting banged up, he's still a nice guy to have on the bench that you can plug in there. Clowney, yeah, again, the money situation is not terrible. I mean, it's not it's not a Deshaun Watson type contract or anything like that. So it's not going to be too much of a hit. Um, I'm just worried about him because the thing about him coming in last year was, he doesn't play hard enough. He always, is injured and stuff like that. He stayed healthy, played his ass off, and so I think that took a lot of people by surprise. And I think the main reason he came back was he wanted to play with Deshaun Watson again, his former teammate in Houston. So I'm just worried that if we start off, 2-5, 3-7, a bad start like that. If his interest and his hustle is really just gonna take a nosedive, so that'll be an interesting thing to look at. And but I mean, like I said, based off last year, I think he can still be a solid guy just based off how much attention Myles Garrett gets. A guy like that can really rush the passer. I think he almost had double digit sacks last year, which is kind of unlike him. And I think that was one of the major reasons why, because he has the best pass rusher in the league, you know, on the other side of him. So if he's motivated and stays healthy, I still think he can help this defense a lot.
All right, and then moving on to kind of something that was lingering the whole offseason. Even before we traded for Deshaun, kind of rumors had circulated that Baker Mayfield had requested a trade out of here already. I remember even as far back as after Week 17 last year, where we lost to the Steelers, and Baker kind of said in the press conference, like, yeah, I'm going to have to talk to my agent about if I'm going to play next week or not. And he ended up not playing, and people really from that point were kind of like, yeah, I think he's out of here. Who knows what would have happened if we didn't get Deshaun Watson, but we did. And then we kind of held on to Baker Mayfield for like several months still after that until eventually we finally traded him to the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, I'm glad it's not, a conference rival, or it's not, somebody that we're going to be playing all the time. I think we're only going to be playing the Panthers once every 4 years. But of course, we played them week 1 this year, which we'll be talking about in our next episode. But what was your initial reaction to seeing Baker traded to the Panthers, and kind of how does it feel now that we're, the start of this podcast, we were Baker guys for the most part, Baker defenders, I think a lot more than other people. As the years went on, it became harder and harder to do so. And I think at the end of last year, we had basically said, like, look, he was hurt. If you give him that one mulligan this year, we'll see what happens next year. And we didn't even get to that. He's gone. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, and not even to pat ourselves on the back or anything, but we were on the Baker train, pretty long, longer than a lot of people that were. I mean, people were off of it, last year or the year before that. Um, again, I think it was just kind of ripping off a band-aid. Um, even before we got Deshaun Watson, they were saying, "Oh yeah, we're still gonna roll with him. He's still our guy." It's like, okay, but, it seems like it's kind of falling apart, so I don't really know how that's gonna work. But okay, I mean, I can't. It was gonna have to be a short deal because you couldn't offer him, well, like Russell Wilson's contract. You couldn't give him like that type of deal, or anything like that. His play didn't justify it. Again, like you said, he was hurt all of last year, and that affected him a lot. Really, just kind of messed up our season right from the get go. It was one of the early games that he got hurt. So yeah, it was kind of it was kind of a relief just to know, in a way, just what was going to happen with him if we were going to have to deal with another season of him, maybe not trusting the front office because all offseason they were talking about trading him or trying to go after Deshaun Watson or whatever. Um, yeah, like you said, we play him week 1. Even if we lose that game, okay, yeah, it's he'll get his for a week or two or whatever. But I mean, people will forget about it even if he plays well. If he plays bad, no one's going to remember that week 1 game. It's not like we're gonna have to face him twice a year in the division or anything like that. So I'm happy about that. Um, just the main thing was always for me, um, I thought he could be a good quarterback when he was on. His main problem, at least for me, was just his inconsistency. His highs were up here and his lows were way down here. When he was on, he looked like a guy that, yeah, I would give, that max contract to, without a doubt. And then when he was off, it was even before the healthy year, when he was having a bad game, it was like, oh my God, this guy can't even play in the league. He looks like, and I'm not even saying just, he's a short white guy. He looked like Johnny Manziel. It was like that bad of a performance out there. So that was the main issue for me, was just his inconsistency. His highs and lows were just all over the place. You never knew which Baker you were going to get, no matter what the situation was. And like you said, we talked about it last year. Um, Going into the fourth quarter in a close game, you almost kind of grew to expect us to throw an interception or just to come up short because of Baker Mayfield, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think for me, what really sealed it last season um, was the game where we still had Odell at the time, and we were actually, I think we actually won this game, so it didn't determine the outcome of the game, but Odell, got open down the field, Baker threw it to him, and it hit him in his back, and Odell hadn't even turned around, and it just hit him in the back. And then you could just see Odell's face after the play, and he turned around, and I immediately just thought, like, this is done. Like, this regime, there's no coming back from this. Not because of that one play, but it was just kind of like the final straw, I think, in many people's mind of like, this just isn't it. And there was that little bit of hope after we traded Odell after that, scenario. And then Baker, of course, balled out against the Bengals, as always, the following week without
Mm-hmm.
Odell. But then he had that injury to his shoulder or collarbone or whatever it was. And then, the rest of the season was what it was. But I think I'll always just remember the Baker regime here. Unfortunately, there's a good memory and a bad memory. I'll always have. The good memory is that first game he came in for Tyrod Taylor, when he got hurt, came in and brought us back against the Jets and got our first win in like a season and a half on Thursday Night Football. And then following that up with last year, that play hitting Odell in the back with the football for a wide open touchdown. Just kind of showed the highs and the lows of Baker with the Browns. But it's finally time to move on. And even though we're going to see him in our first game here that we'll be talking about, it's time to kind of move on from that. And I'm surprised. I never would have thought it would have happened just even 2 years ago or going into last year. But yeah, it just goes to show how quickly things change in the NFL.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I just saw the clip of it the other day when somebody was talking about Baker. I think in my heart, I think this is the game you're referring to. Was it against Minnesota, that Odell play?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. I think in my heart, I can't remember if it was the one. There was two. I think there was two in that game that he really just missed Odell on. If it wasn't this one, it was the other one. It was again. I don't know if it was the one that hit him in the back or just like it was still like 5 yards behind him, and he was just like he had nobody around
Mm-hmm.
him, and then he just gets up and you see it on his face, even through his face mask and his visor. You just
Mm-hmm.
see him like, come on, like come on, like in my heart, I knew like this isn't gonna work, but like in my head, it didn't hit me until later in the year against Green Bay, where he threw four
Yeah.
interceptions. I'm just like, all right, yeah, this is done. We need a fresh start. This isn't gonna work. And yeah, like you said, there's been plenty of highs. There's some great memories. Obviously the playoff game where we just kicked the shit out of Pittsburgh right from the beginning. And I loved his fire when he was playing well. And then there's the game like we lost against the Broncos to who was even
Brandon
their
Allen.
quarterback. Oh God, yeah, and he like shaved his beard and mustache like three times during the game, like, and then you have that. So it was just all over the place. Um, and it's I don't know, it's just funny to hear people like I felt like you said, we were on the Baker train a lot longer than other people, especially, like national media. They were like pretty much off the Baker train for the most part.
Yeah.
But then now, as soon as he gets traded, they're like, oh yeah, this guy is a great quarterback. They really missed out. They're gonna regret this. It's like, okay, where was this when you guys were trashing him? Even when he was leading us to the playoffs, like you were still not with him, not saying he was a decent quarterback at all. But now you've just completely changed your tune. So, um, yeah, I mean, best of luck to him again. Except when we play him. But yeah, it's just gonna be remembered as just a roller coaster from beginning to end, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and just quickly to touch on the national media point, I've never been one to take on the mentality of like, oh, it's Cleveland against the world. Everyone hates Cleveland, in the
Mhm.
Browns, because the Browns have done a lot over the last 20 years to earn the reputation that they have. But I think this whole situation over this offseason with Baker and then going and getting Deshaun and all of this stuff, it really did open my eyes a little bit to, we are treated differently. And it's not just the Browns. You could probably argue that maybe like the Jets or, the Lions are kind of treated in the same way. But it's like, no one wants the Browns to be good. And like people can say like, "Oh yeah, we want Cleveland to be good," all this stuff, but they really don't. And I remember the day after or the day before rather, we got Deshaun Watson when the Browns, it had kind of been publicly announced that we attempted to get him, and then he ultimately said no and didn't want to come here, and it was down to like two other teams. And everyone was clowning on Cleveland for this, and being like they forgot they were Cleveland, they forgot they were the Browns. A good quarterback would never go there. And oh, where's Deshaun going to go? Is he going to go to the Saints? How cool would that be? Is he going to go to Atlanta? How cool would that be? And then he goes to the Browns, and all of a sudden it's, I can't believe the Browns would trade for someone like Deshaun and all of these things. And it's like, you weren't going to have those same narratives, or to the very least, you weren't going to be this harsh on him if he went to the Saints or if he went to Atlanta. It's because he came to Cleveland that gives you the green light to be like, oh, what a terrible organization to trade for this person. They should have kept Baker. The reason they wanted us to keep Baker is because they wanted us to be bad. And it's like, I hate to like succumb to that mindset, right, of like the homer who thinks that about the national media, but it just was so blatantly obvious to me over this offseason that I think I'm putting a ban on myself from talking about the national media this year because, it's just, at this point, it's so blatantly obvious that it's not even worth, talking about. We have our far and few between defenders out there, the Chris Broussards or the here and there, but really for the most part, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything you said. And yeah, I mean, like I said, people were just like trashing him all over the place. Like, even when we were still like defending him, like, no, like, he needs more weapons on offense. He needs a better offensive line. He has all these things going on. He can be a good quarterback. And people were like, no, he's washed. He was a bust, whatever. And then, yeah, now it's like, oh my God, he has Christian McCaffrey and, all these guys. He has a good defense and stuff. Like, now he's going to, like, oh my God, doesn't Cleveland know they just gave up like a top 10 quarterback? It's like, no, weren't you watching the Packers game like we just mentioned? Weren't you watching that interception he tried to throw to Jarvis Landry that was like 10 yards over his head and 20 yards behind him?
Yeah.
Like, were you not watching these plays? So again, like I said, win or lose, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, people will laugh like, "Oh yeah, Cleveland, he got the better of you now." It's like, okay, then whatever. But I just want to get past this first game so we can hopefully just move on. And like you said, just forget what the national media says because they just need a punching bag. And I think other fans, I think they're worried if Cleveland ever gets good, then their team might be at risk for being the NFL's punching bag now.
Yeah. Fair, totally fair. Last piece of news here in the offseason, not really a transaction per se, but Kareem Hunt, who's in his last year of his deal that he signed a couple years ago, did demand a trade during training camp, sat out for a little bit of drills and those types of things, but ultimately the Browns just said no. And Kareem Hunt, basically, from what I've heard, his mentality was he loves Cleveland, he loves playing in Cleveland, but he knows that Cleveland isn't going to pay him, which is fair. We're not going to. I mean, we just don't have the money to pay him on top of Nick Chubb, and he knows that he will get money if he gets traded somewhere else, and that was his motivation. But credit to the Browns front office, in my opinion. They just said, like, look, no. I mean, you can not play, I guess, if you want, but we're not trading you. I mean, just look what's happened the last couple of years. Like, we need you. And he said, okay. And he just went back to camp, and now he's going to play with us this year. And it was one of the most, like, quietly, kind of calm and civil trade demands over the offseason. But it's just one of those situations where I got to give credit to the front office because they do not let players push them around here. I mean, Baker demanded a trade. David Njoku demanded a trade, Kareem Hunt, like they do not really bow to anyone's demands. And these players, they come back and play or even sign with us like Njoku. So I got to give them credit for that. What did you think of that whole situation as that unfolded the last few weeks?
Yeah, I kind of wish that all, trade drama would just end this way. Like, trade me right now. I don't want to be here. Trade me. No. All right, I'll come back. It's like, and like nobody's talking about it now. It's like, oh, all is well. It's fine. We're going to be rolling just like business as usual. So, Yeah, again, I mean, it wasn't like anything like, oh, he's a piece of shit, like fuck this guy, I'm not rooting for him anymore. I mean, you knew eventually he was probably going to get tired of not being the feature guy, not having a big contract. So it wasn't completely shocking, but again, I was more shocked by um, just how quickly the front office squashed it and just said, no, like we need you. You're a valuable member of this team, and Chubb, again, he had a bad injury in college. It just takes one hit and he could be down for the end of the season. And then Kareem Hunt is another guy who's still extremely talented as a running back. So I mean, if Chubb goes down, I mean Kareem Hunt can easily step in there and be a great running back still. So we need him on this team. I'm happy they got it worked out. Um, but I do think his days are numbered for sure. I think he'll try to get a contract somewhere else, and eventually we'll have to let him go. Again, like we were talking about, just with all the money that we have tied down in guys like Miles Garrett and Denzel Ward, just to name a few, and Nick Chubb for that matter. So we're not gonna be paying two running backs. We're gonna be paying Chubb, and that's it. So I'm happy he got squashed, but yeah, his days unfortunately are gonna be numbered here.
Yeah, I agree, but hopefully this year is a great one for him, and we're going to need him this year more than ever, especially during those first 11 games. I mean, a lot of people say he's the best backup running back in the league. I don't even consider him a backup. I feel like it's a 1-2 punch for sure. I consider them both starters, and they're both hopefully going to be great because we're going to need that running game. So that's going to conclude our off-season recap here on Hot Takes on the Lake. We are about to jump in and do our week-by-week predictions, quickly going over the Browns' schedule. Just doing the thing everyone does where we go through the schedule and go win loss, and based on really nothing but our pure gut instinct. So we're going to be jumping into that. And again, if it's your first time here, we're just two lifelong Cleveland Browns fans who love talking about the Browns. So if that's you as well, make sure to subscribe, whether you're listening to our audio podcast or watching us on YouTube, so you can see all of our episodes this season for the Browns. Nick, jumping into week one, we've already kind of mentioned it, and our next episode is going to be all about it. But week one here for the Browns at Carolina, Baker as a starting quarterback. Do you think the Browns finally, after I think 2 decades at this point, I can't remember, finally win a week one game in Carolina?
I think we do. I think we finally get the monkey off our back. I think it honestly might be a close game. Again, just with the quarterback situation, I think it's going to hamper us in a lot of these games. They're going to be a lot closer than they should be. But I just think with our pass rush, obviously led by Miles Garrett, that's not a great offensive line by any means in Carolina. So, I think they're going to be relying heavily on Christian McCaffrey to make plays rather than Baker Mayfield, and I think we can get after him. So I would expect a win in Carolina to start off the season.
I'm going to agree. When I first went into this, I tried to come at it from a not too optimistic standpoint for the first 11 games, but I got to predict a win for week one, because if we're losing to Carolina, who in my opinion is going to be one of the worst teams in the league, that's not going to bode well for our first 11 games, and it's not going to be a good look. I understand the storyline of Baker Mayfield, but we can't let that be the reason we lose. We need a win in week one. If we went, 2-9 over the first 11 games, I would just hope to God week one is one of the ones we win, to be honest. I mean, not good. So I'm going to do a win there. Week number 2, our home opener against the New York Jets. What do you got for this one?
I definitely have this as a win as well. Just but they have a lot of young talents that I think will be good in a few years, but they're still not solidified at the quarterback position with Zach Wilson. I mean, hell, Joe Flacco, I think he's still on the team. He might get a lot of reps this year just based on how if Zach Wilson can stay healthy or even play well. So I think we'll definitely beat the Jets for sure. We better beat the Jets. I'll say that.
Yeah, I got to win here as well. As difficult as it is to start a season 2-0, I think we're facing two really bad teams. So you got to go 2-0. You can't lose against these teams if you want any hope of progressing in the season. I don't know much about the Jets beyond that, so I don't have much else to say, but I'm definitely pulling for a win there. If we lose either of these first 2 week games, it's going to be very hard to bounce back this season. Then we have our first primetime game of the season, Thursday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll get to watch it locally here, but for anyone not locally, it's being put on Amazon Prime with that new Thursday Night Football deal that they have. What do you have for our first matchup? This one is at home versus Pittsburgh.
this is another one. I completely agree with you. The first three games have to be must wins just for a emotional standpoint. Um, just with Pittsburgh's instability at quarterback, they just need Mitch Trubisky, their starter. That bodes well for us, obviously. And even their other two quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett is third string, actually, their first round pick at quarterback. He's third string, and I can't remember who their backup is at the moment, but it's not anybody good, so don't worry about that. So I think on a short week, we'll still be able to beat Pittsburgh for sure.
Um, do they still have Mason Rudolph?
Yes, Mason Rudolph is the backup
Oof.
somehow.
Uh, yeah. So this is where, for me, of course, I would love a win here. It's at home against the Steelers in prime time. I think for me, though, saying that, especially because of the game we have next week, thinking that we're going to win this one and win our first three games with Jacoby Brissett is just a little bit too much for me. And if you're new here, my favorite coach in the NFL is Mike Tomlin, and it sucks that he's on my least favorite team in the NFL, the Steelers, but he's just too good of a coach. Jacoby Brissett up against, TJ Watt, it's just not something I'm really looking forward to. So I'm going to say our first loss comes on Thursday Night Football, unfortunately. My only hope is because it's the short week turnaround, we have more of a chance there, but even that doesn't really seem to affect Mike Tomlin. So I'm going to go with a loss in that one. But week 4, we're back on the road against Atlanta. What do you have for that?
This is another tough one because I feel like this not even a trap game. I feel like this is a game that we could just kind of find ourselves being a lot closer than it should be. Um, but I think we'll be able to pull off the win. So I think it'll be very close. But I have us winning in Atlanta to start 4-0.
Yeah, I think we're just so lucky with these first stretch of games here of the teams we got during the suspension. I would have been, very angry if the schedule had been flipped and Deshaun, was facing these teams later on. So I'm glad we're facing them early. I'm definitely going to have a win here against Atlanta. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the league, but they're definitely not a team we should lose to regardless of who our quarterback is. So I'm going to go with the win there as well. So, Nick, you have us, though, at 4-0 so far. This is the first, I would say, really tough opponent of the season, the Los Angeles Chargers. This is at home, at least, but we had a pretty big game against them. It was either last year or the year before. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was last year, though, that extremely high-scoring game where we gave up like 47 points or something. So don't know if we're going to replicate that this year. Hopefully not from a defensive side, but what do you have for this game?
Yeah, I have this as our first loss. It's gonna be at the Chargers at home. I think the defense. I think this might be the story for the season. The defense will be able to hold its own for a while, but if the offense is stalling out, just with Brissett at quarterback, I really think that a team like the Chargers, who's explosive, has a great young quarterback in Justin Herbert, they're really going to take advantage of that. So I have this as our first loss of the season here.
Yeah, I have a loss as well. I think this is the game of that Jacoby Brissett stretch that if we pull off a win here, this should be our biggest, celebratory win if we get this one, even more so than our divisional games. I think we have a bigger shot in our divisional games here with Jacoby than against the Chargers. I do not see us winning this one, but so I have this as a loss here. I would even maybe say our most predictable loss of the entire season. I'll be shocked if we win this one, but I'm sure I'll still have a good time watching it, hopefully. Moving on, we are another tough matchup the next week. New England Patriots at home, and big question mark for them this year as far as how they're going to do with their entire season. But what do you have for this game against the Browns?
This is a tough one for me because I'm not high on New England. Um, a lot of people think they can be really good, really challenge Buffalo for that division. I'm not so sure, but what was it the last two times we've played them? They just kicked our ass. They've just completely destroyed us. So I have this as another loss. I think like Atlanta. I think this will be a good one. I'm not sold on Mac Jones as a quarterback yet. He kind of fell off after his hot start last season, but I think Bill Belichick and that defense can really just find a way to bottle up guys like Chubb and Hunt and really make Brissett beat you. And I just don't think that's realistic for us.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really big bummer if we lose this game, especially since I have us losing that game to the Steelers, because that means that over this 4-game stretch, the 3 games at home, we lose all of them. But I think that is going to happen, unfortunately. I don't see us beating New England without a really good quarterback, which we just aren't going to have at that point. So hopefully our running game can get us through that game, or maybe even we can get lucky with some bad weather. Or, that could really be the point in the year where we get helped out with some of that Cleveland weather, But yeah, I'm going to put a loss for us there as well. And then week 7 at Baltimore, first divisional game on the road for the season. What do you have for this one?
I have this down as a loss as well. Just really kind of falling apart after that hot start.
Yeah.
But Baltimore's going to be a tough one. I mean, obviously Lamar Jackson is just one of the toughest guys to game plan for in the NFL. And they're going to have a lot of guys that really, it hurt them last year having them injured. They're going to get them back this year. Like J.K. Dobbins on offense, Marcus Peters on defense. So I think this is going to be a really tough game for us. It could be one of the ugly games this season. So I have us dropping our third straight in Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the loss here too, just because I think it's a little bit too optimistic to think we're gonna go out there with Jacoby Brissett and beat the Ravens in Baltimore. That'd be a little bit optimistic, a little bit too much for me. But I will say though, the reason I have more faith in this one and the next week game than the Chargers is because for some reason, divisionally, we've just done really well the last 2 years, especially from a defensive standpoint. One of the Ravens games last year, I think we caused like 3 turnovers in a row. For whatever reason, Lamar and Joe Burrow do not do great against our defense. And hopefully that continues this year. I'm looking forward to that. But I do ultimately think it will be a loss. And we do follow that up again right before the bye week with another divisional game, this one at home against Cincinnati. What do you have for this one? This one's Monday Night Football, so our second primetime game of the year. And as far as the scheduling goes, our last, unless we get flexed in the primetime later on. But this is on Halloween. What do you think about this one?
I have this one as a win. I think we'll bounce back and beat Cincinnati. It just seems like a team that we have their number. Who knows what to expect from Brissett on offense, but you know, I think it's going to be a very Chubb heavy and Kareem Hunt heavy game. Defense always plays well against Cincinnati. I don't think they're frauds by any means. I think they're a very good team and could, easily win this division hands down. Pretty much fighting with Baltimore for the division this year. But I think they did have a little bit of magic to them last year with their Super Bowl run. Again, not frauds by any means, but still, I think they're. I don't think they're that caliber of a team just yet to be like perennial, make the Super Bowl type of team. So I think we'll bounce back and get a win at home on Halloween.
Yeah, I'm predicting a win here. This might be the most optimistic I get in the Jacoby Brissett stretch of games here. Until Cincinnati beats us, I'm not going to think they can beat us. So, they went to the Super Bowl last year and they lost to us twice. So, I'm not going to think that they can beat us until they do. Additionally, I think Denzel Ward, hopefully, he is healthy for this game because he is going to be a key, with Jamar Chase in that game. If he can keep that in check, then I don't think Cincinnati has really a chance against us. And I hope that, we feast on Joe Burrow there. So optimistic for that one. Don't think it's going to be an easy win by any means, but I'm glad it's at home, and I'm going to say we get the win there too. So going into the bye week, you have them at 5-3. I have them at 4-4, so it's pretty close there so far. We have a couple more games coming out of the bye week here, a few more without Deshaun Watson. The first one is at Miami. What do you have for that one?
I have this one as a win, purely because I don't believe in Tua as a quarterback. I know their coach Mike McDaniels. He's an interesting character. He's like, he's like this nerdy, like young hipster looking guy who's just like, oh yeah, Tua is the most accurate quarterback I've ever seen throw the ball. It's like, all right, well we'll see about that. They have Tyreek Hill, so that's going to help him out a bunch, but. I still don't really believe in Tua as a quarterback just yet. So I think that'll be a win coming off the bye week.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super important for us to win this game. I have it as a win as well. Of these 3 games after the bye week before Deshaun comes back, this is the only one I would say we have a decent shot of winning. So I definitely have this one as a win. I'm kind of nervous about it, though, because if we lose this, we're probably losing all 3 before we get Deshaun. And by that point, it might be, too little too late, even if we were to win out. So I'm going to go with the win here. I think it's going to actually be a very important game. And then and also Jacoby Brissett revenge game. He played in Miami last year. So the next week, though, one of our toughest games, if not the toughest, on the schedule at Buffalo. What do you have for that one?
I have this one as a loss. Unfortunately, I mean, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, just one of the best duos in the league. I mean, they're really poised at a Super Bowl run. I really think anything less than that for them this season is going to be a major disappointment. So I think this is another game that, early the defense might keep you in it for a while, but I think the offense, especially throwing the ball, and especially up in Buffalo too, it could be completely horrible weather up there at the end of November. I mean, they just get, weather's bad here, but they get just pounded with snow,
Yeah.
especially in that stadium. So, I really think throwing the ball is going to be a major factor in that game. I just think Josh Allen and especially Stephon Diggs are just too much for us. So I think we'll drop that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna have this as a loss as well. I'm gonna be a Bills guy this season because I think they are the best shot of Kansas City not going to the Super Bowl, and just for the sake of league parity, I would love for Kansas City not to go to the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna be rooting for the Bills, and I think they're not in this game, but this season, and I think that they're going to take this game, unfortunately. And then the next game, the last game of the Jacoby Brissett era, versus Tampa Bay, probably for the last time we'll see Tom Brady in First Energy Stadium. So if you're going to go to a Browns game this year, that's probably one you might want to have on your list. I think it's the week of Thanksgiving, right after Thanksgiving there. What do you have for this one?
I have this one as a loss as well. Um, and like you said, I just think Tampa Bay is another one of those teams that, if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, that's a major disappointment on their end. Um, they're just too much. Again, that's going to be a team where, the defense can hang on for a while, but just with the lack of, decent play at the quarterback position, and just, the lack of talent at receiver besides Amari Cooper, I think that's going to be a major factor in why we lose this game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the overall morale of the Browns, I'm not going to say it's going to be bad necessarily, but I think we're going to be kind of just ready to see Deshaun at this point. And, wouldn't be the first time that we would beat Tom Brady in First Energy Stadium. We did it before, but I don't think it's going to happen this time. So I'm going to say a loss for this one as well. And that means that at this point, it looks like, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You would have the Browns at 6-5. I would have them at 5-6. So pretty similar through those first 11 games, just about either just under or just over 500 when Deshaun Watson comes back. And I think, honestly, that's probably in both of our cases, whether it's 5-6 or 6-5, whatever games they win and lose, that's probably best case scenario, right? I mean, if you're that close to 500 over the first 11 games and Deshaun can come in, that's probably the best we can hope for if we want any shot at the playoffs. So he comes back, first game in his old stadium at Houston. What do you have for his debut with the Cleveland Browns?
This one's a tough one. Because I don't believe in Houston at all. I don't think Davis Mills is a great quarterback. I mean, he gave us problems, granted, last year when we played them. Um, but I don't know. I think Deshaun, I don't think the noise, like obviously he's going to get booed out of the building, but I don't think it's going to rattle him. I just think he's going to be very rusty. So I think this is a game where it could be very low scoring, kind of a sloppy game by both teams, but I could see us dropping this one. So I think we're going to drop this one in Houston, unfortunately.
I'm going to say this one's a win only because it would be, kind of similar to week one. It's kind of like, yeah, storyline wise, it's going to suck if he comes back. We're on the edge there of our season falling apart, and then he loses that first game to his old team. That's going to be unfortunate. And also, that's what everyone besides Cleveland's going to be hoping for. Everyone's going to be hoping Houston beats him in his first game back. So I'm really hoping, we can get the win there. But with that being said, also I think something to keep in mind too is that even though he's suspended, I think after 6 weeks or so, he is allowed to practice with us again. So, I'm hoping that I know that's not a real game and nothing can replicate a real game, but hopefully he gets some of that rust off, as he, has been in this offseason and preseason. But yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I almost have the least amount of confidence in this game for the ones at the end of the season, even though it's against Houston. But yeah, I'm going to go with the win there optimistically. And then next week, his first divisional game on the road against the Bengals. What do you have for this one?
I had this one as a loss as well. I think especially because Cincinnati's really going to be fighting for one of the top spots in the AFC, and I think beating them earlier in the year with Brissett at quarterback, I think it's going to give them a lot of motivation to come out there and play well. So I think we're going to drop this one in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm gonna have this one as a win. I mean, not much to add after what I said before. Until they beat us, I'm not gonna think they can beat us, so I'll leave it at that. I do think this one is going to be a win. Hopefully, we can once again sweep the Bengals. And then the next week, so again, both times Cincinnati and Baltimore are back to back this year. So this time after Cincinnati, we're at home against Baltimore. What do you have for that one?
I have this one as a win. I have this one as Deshaun Watson's first win in a Browns uniform. Um, I think maybe the first 2 weeks, especially if we get hit in the mouth, by those two teams, especially Cincinnati. I think that could be a really big wake up call to this team, and I think they'll come out motivated to beat Baltimore, especially if they're fighting with Cincinnati for the division. I think we'll probably be in pretty not a lock, but we'll be in solid position to finish third in the division by this time. So I think we'll be motivated to kind of play spoiler for them and ruin their chances of winning the division. So I think this will be his first win.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that this is the opposite. I'm gonna say it's his first loss. I don't think that I just don't see the Ravens losing to us in that game unless they for whatever reason are no longer like competitive in the division. I think then we might have a shot just based on like morale and everything, but if they're at all competing, I think the chances of us winning are pretty low in that game. So I'm going to say that's actually his first loss with the Browns. Going on to week 16, this is more of an odd one for later in the season, but it's against the Saints at home on Christmas Eve. What do you have for this one?
I have this one as a win. Um, it'll be Jarvis Landry's return to Cleveland, which will be nice to see him there. He'll be able to see his old pals and stuff. But if they're rolling with Jameis Winston, I'm going to be confident in that game because as good as he looks at times, he looks equally as bad. He's a risk taker. He's a gunslinger, quote unquote. He just likes to throw it out there. If he gets picked off, oh well. As long as we win the game, who cares? So I think we can really, get some good pressure on him. Denzel and Newsom and the safeties out there can really take advantage. You get a couple of interceptions and just that team used to playing in a dome. Christmas Eve here, it's going to be cold as hell and snow. We'll see about that. So I think weather could also play a factor in that as well. So I think we'll beat New Orleans.
I'm going to have that as a win also. I think that's actually going to be a pretty important game. And it's just one of those like odd, like not, conference opponents that we do need to get the win. And I hope we do. A lot of people are saying the Saints are going to be sneaky good this year. That maybe that's the case. I'll believe it when I see that. But yeah, I do have a win for us there. January 1st, New Year's Day in Washington against the Commanders. What do you have for this one?
This is another tough one too. I don't even know who the starting quarterback is for Washington. If it's still is it Heineke?
I'll look
Is their
that up real
quarterback
quick.
still? But besides that, they still got good weapons. They got Terry McLaurin on the outside.
Carson
Jonathan
Wentz.
Allen. Oh God. Okay. Yeah, this is the win. Never mind. This is the win.
Yeah, that's that's an interesting way to look at it. I want to say optimistically win here. I think what I'll say is I'll put a loss here just because like it's on the road late in the year. But I will say that I think we're gonna between New Orleans and Washington, we're gonna win one of these games. So because I said a win against New Orleans, I'll put a loss here. But I think one of these games will win, one of them will lose. Just late in the season, we drop one of those, we'll probably end up regretting it. But yeah, I'll go with a loss there. And then last game of the regular season. Let's see here. We got 5, 6, 7, 8. So you right now have them at 9-7. So going into Pittsburgh, last game of the year, what do you have?
I have this as a win as well. And based off how I think Pittsburgh's season is going to pan out, I think there's a good chance that Mason Rudolph or even Kenny Pickett could be playing in this game for sure. If their season is just a complete crapshoot and just a loss. And I think in this position we might still be able to fight for a wild card spot. So I think there's gonna be motivation to, have the starters, in this game for sure. And I think that would just be too much for him. Especially, we'll have Deshaun Watson back. He'll be in somewhat of a rhythm. Getting his bearings again. So I think he'll really take advantage of just the lack of quarterback on Pittsburgh's side. So I think we finish the season with a win.
I'm gonna say a win as well. That would make them 9-8 for me, 10-7 for you. So I don't really have much to add as far as the game's concerned. It could be an important game. I think, unfortunately, and this kind of leads into our next portion here, but I think, unfortunately for us, we're going to be just a little bit too far out of contention for the division at this point. My prediction for the division is actually going to be the Ravens. I know a lot of people are going to say the Bengals, but I think the Ravens actually come back and take it this year. But at this point, do you think 10-7 would be enough? Do you think that final win is one that's going to get us into the playoffs in a wild card spot? Or do you think our division is going to be unusually bad and 10-7 actually wins the division? Or are you thinking the Browns miss it this year?
I would say personally, I think Cincinnati is going to repeat as champions. I think Baltimore is going to be right behind them, and then Pittsburgh is going to be bringing up the rear. I think we'll be solidly in third place. Unfortunately, I think the AFC is just very good, and it's just going to be a case of, yeah, I mean, maybe my picks were a little optimistic. I can definitely see us dropping some of those games during the Brissett era, quote unquote, earlier in the season for sure. So maybe we won't even be in this type of position, but I think just with the conference the way it is, how strong it is, unfortunately 10-7 is just not going to cut it this year.
Yeah, and obviously I'm at 9-8, one game worse. I don't think that's going to cut it either. So, it sucks to go into the season with the mentality of both of us thinking or predicting we're going to be missing the playoffs. I think if the Jacoby Brissett-led Browns in the first 11 games can overperform, maybe win 7 or 8 of those games, and we have a shot. But I think it's going to be a tough one. But again, I'm still falling back on the optimistic side that, look, this move partly was a sacrifice of this season. Back when we first made the trade, I was even saying, Deshaun could be suspended for the whole year. It is what it is. This season is a little bit of a sacrifice because of the overall long-term future. But with him only being gone 11 games, that does crack open the door. And what I would say is that if we can sneak in to that 7th seed or the 6th seed even, I think we would be a wild card team to absolutely watch out for and be worried for if that happens. So I can guarantee we're going to be a wild card team that no division winner is going to want to face in the wild card, but I do think we're going to miss it, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I said, any other year, if the AFC was kind of just average, I would say we could probably sneak into the playoffs with a 10-7 record. Unfortunately, just looking at the teams around the conference, I think it's just going to be, you're going to have to win 11 at least, get to 12 to make a serious run at the playoffs, and I just don't see that happening. Like I said, I mean, some of the ones that I had us winning for, when we have Brissett, I mean, I'm not completely confident in those games. I could easily see us losing a few of those too, so maybe we're not even in that position. But I mean, even just me personally going into this season, like you just said, it's not a crapshoot by any means, but I'm kind of looking forward to 2023.
Yeah.
That being the year that really we take that leap. We have a full offseason, a full healthy Deshaun Watson back, and can really, take advantage of that, through the draft, through free agency, or trading or whatever, fill those holes, defensive line, especially on the interior, fill those holes at linebacker for sure, and then receiver. Absolutely, you need to get better receivers and just better depth of receiver position. So really, 2023 is the year I'm looking for us to take that leap and really be that contender that this team, at least on paper, can absolutely be year in and year out.
For sure. All right, and then that leads us into our last prediction here. Super Bowl prediction. What teams and who wins? Would you like to go first? Would you like me to go first? What do you want?
You go first.
All right, so I'm going to go with, on the AFC side, I've already kind of said it a little bit, but I'm going to go with Buffalo. I think this is their year to get to the Super Bowl. Hopefully, after this year, it's the Browns' year moving forward. But this year, I think, is going to be hopefully their year. I'd much rather see them than Kansas City or the Cincinnati or Baltimore in there. So I'm going to go with them in the AFC side. In the NFC side, I've been predicting it, I think, every single year we've done this. So until it's correct, I'm going to have to keep predicting it. I'm going to have to go with the Packers to finally make it to the Super Bowl. I think they've been to the conference championship like the last 3 years. Every year I've predicted them to go to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So that's insane. Hopefully they make it this year, just because I'd love to see Aaron Rodgers get one last shot at a Super Bowl. But unfortunately, I think it's a little bit too little too late for him. And I think if my prediction is correct and they do make it there, they will not win. And I do think Buffalo takes it this year. That would be my prediction for the Super Bowl champs.
That's fair. I wouldn't be disappointed with that because I have always been an Aaron Rodgers fan. Um, and I would like to see him get one more. I mean, just with the talent he has, it's almost a crime that he has just one Super Bowl ring on his resume. So it would be nice for him to win that, especially with all the uncertainty going into the season. If he was gonna, there's heavy consideration on his part. He even said that he was going to retire and not even come back. So really, his days are numbered now. So that wouldn't be too bad to see that. I'm gonna also pick Buffalo on the AFC side. Um, I think also they're going to benefit from the AFC being so good that a lot of the other teams like Kansas City and Cincinnati, I think they might just knock themselves out. So I think they're going to come on top in the AFC. And on the NFC, I still got to roll with Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. Um, I think it's just, it's an old joke now that he just is still that good at that age. It really is just unbelievable. And again, his days really are numbered. His days have been numbered for the past like 10 years. So really, this might be one of his last chances to really get there. And I think he's going to be really motivated. But I do have the Bills beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, which may be his last Super Bowl appearance. But I think the Bills, they lost four straight in the 80s. I think they finally get the monkey off their back, or 90s, maybe. Sorry. They finally get the monkey off their back and finally win a Super Bowl. I think this is the year that it's all going to happen for him. Wouldn't be shocked if Josh Allen is MVP as well. I think he's kind of poised to really take that step and really just be the best quarterback in the league.
All right, well, that's going to be our predictions for the Browns season as well as our Super Bowl prediction. If it's your first time here, again, make sure to subscribe, whether it's in the audio podcast platform or on YouTube. We're going to be previewing the Browns and Panthers opening week game in our next episode in just a few days. And join us here on Hot Takes on the Lake for this season with the Browns.
Yeah, thank you guys. We're excited to actually be adding YouTube to the rotation for this medium, and yeah, we're just super excited for another great season. Again, it might be rough, but hey, we're still gonna be here every week talking about it, and still gonna be just happy to be talking football every week. So, thank you guys, and we'll talk to you guys later.